Hey there, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on the planet. Really happy that you're tuned into us tonight. My name is Jennifer Turner, and I'm the director of the China Environment Forum at the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, D.C., where for 21 years I've put on meetings and publications and focused a lot on China, as my name implies. But in the last year, I've done a big project called Turning the Tide on Plastic Waste in Asia. And I'm really pleased that have been invited to be the moderator for today's panel. So first I have to thank the co-organizers, Michigan State University, the University of Hawaii Center for Southeast Asia, the East-West Center, and Chiang Mai University Regional Center for Social Studies and Sustainability. I want to welcome you to this webinar, which is called Plastics and Environmental Trash in Southeast Asia. It's a part of a four-part series entitled Southeast Asia in Transition. Plastic runs through it. The first panel is all about plastics, and all the others have different topics, like the next one on fisheries is going to have one person speaking on plastic. They start today, and they'll run through December. We want to thank the Luce Foundation for its support of our collaboration, and we invite anyone who is listening who wants to know more about our work or the webinar series to reach out to us. So quick housekeeping notes before I introduce our speakers. That audience members, there's a Q&A box at the bottom. Please feel free to ask a question, and we'll do our best to answer them closer to the end. I'll probably weave yours in with some of my own questions. And so let's get started. So from cradle to grave, so from the time when oil and gas is extracted, to pellets being made, to plastics being manufactured, and then later on when it's thrown out, plastic is leaking into the environment. 80% of the plastic that reaches the ocean comes from land. And Southeast Asia and China are the top region of the world where plastic is leaking into the ocean. And I'm really excited tonight because I've got 4 speakers who are working on the front lines to try to stem the tide of plastic waste leaking. I've asked each of them to start off our talk tonight. They're going to talk 6 to 8 minutes and introduce the work that they are doing around plastic issues. And we're going to start off tonight. We're going to have Tiza Mafira, who is from Indonesia Plastic Diet. And she's going to talk about how the work that they're doing with communities and governments and how to reduce, the project is about plastic bags, but it goes much further. Next, Doug Woodring, founder and executive manager of the Hong Kong-based Ocean Recovery. We'll talk about some of the broader trends of plastic waste in Southeast Asia, and then dive into this fascinating project that his organization is doing in Cambodia. It's more than just cleaning up trash. And I don't want to steal his thunder there on that. And then jumping in after Doug, we have Marian Ledesma, the zero waste campaigner at Greenpeace Southeast Asia in the Philippines. Just as a side note, I know Indonesia, there's a lot going on, but the Philippines is really the heart of the Break Free from Plastic movement. So I think it's going to be really exciting to hear the kinds of work that Greenpeace is doing with community members there. But equally exciting, everyone's going to be exciting, but equally exciting is our last speaker, Sun Quach, who is Vietnam Senior Manager for Pacific Environment. That's a San Francisco-based NGO that also works in China, Vietnam, Russia, and the Arctic. Not all on plastic, but plastic is one of their big themes. She's going to share the insights into this kind of plastic audit that a bunch of the Break Free from Plastic organizations have been doing in Vietnam, but also some of their policy advocacy work. And so all of these people, again, they're dealing with how to stop plastic leaking from cradle to grave. And so I'm going to pass the virtual microphone to Tiza Mafira. And she's a good storyteller. All of these people are good storytellers, but Tiza, tell us your story.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. It's morning here, very early in the morning. Luckily, I've had my coffee, so I should be able to provide you with a coherent story, hopefully. So it's, I think I'll be talking today about our work in Indonesia in phasing out single-use plastics, and we focused on plastic bags, but as you say, I read a tweet the other day that said, you know what, it's interesting that the extinction of dinosaurs is probably going to lead to the extinction of humans, because plastic comes from oil comes from the, fossilized dinosaurs. And people don't realize sometimes when they use, plastic for about 15 minutes, how many millions of years it took this material to materialize in front of us, only for us to use it for 15 minutes and dispose of it, because it's designed that way. So there's something very fundamentally wrong about the way the single-use plastic is produced and designed. And we work on those fundamental issues. I'll share my screen. Here we go, phasing out single-use plastic bags in Indonesia. The whole idea behind our movement, the Indonesia Plastic Bag Diet movement, is that if you want change, massive impact change, you need to be able to show change as an external pressure and change from the inside of policy making. And so we applied these external, internal factors in every single thing that we do. External factors, we've had campaigns, we've had fun educational activities like the one that we see in the picture before us, where this is kind of like a plastic bag robbery, where we go out into the streets with volunteers and we ask people for their plastic bags when we see them, and then we exchange it with a tote bag. All these kinds of campaigns are good because they provide people with kind of the feeling of empowerment that they can drive change. But 70% of our work is actually internal change, which is that we work to lobby subnational governments to create policies that phase out single-use plastic, starting with plastic bags. So this is very early on about 9 years ago, very early on in the start of our organization, where we pushed the Ministry of Environment to have a plastic bag charge, and they agreed to trial it in 27 cities nationwide. And it was a success. It was the first program in the country that massively showed how, if you have a policy that limits consumers' access to plastic bags, as opposed to giving plastic bags for free, that actually has a great effectiveness in nudging consumer behavior not to use plastic bags. So plastic bag use plummeted 55% in 3 months. But of course, we didn't want to stop there. And the snowball effect of that was that one city started thinking about banning them altogether and not being, not being satisfied with just a charge, but Banjarmasin, which is a relatively unknown city, I guess, globally, it was the first to ban single-use plastic. And because it was a relatively unknown city, globally, it wasn't like Bali or Jakarta. It was really hard for this regulation to gain traction, to get replicated elsewhere. And so we had to try extra hard to bring out this story of Banjarmasin, this great city, the most progressive city when it comes to single-use plastic in Indonesia. So what we did was that we got all the other cities to come to Banjarmasin. So we invited about 20 plus other city officials from other cities to come to Banjarmasin. We had this facilitated discussion with the Ministry of Environment. We took all these officials around to the different supermarkets that had banned plastic bags and showed them firsthand how it's actually working. Nobody's really complaining. It's actually quite easy, and Banjarmasin's happy with it. And immediately after this workshop, we started seeing results. We started seeing other cities contacting us, asking, what should we do if we're thinking of implementing a similar regulation. And so we started having template regulations, just for other cities to kind of easily replicate in their own cities. By the way, today, there are 50 plus cities across Indonesia that have banned plastic bags. So this is within 8 years. It's not short, but it's worth it. The other instrument that we managed to push was a fiscal instrument, where long story short, I had an opportunity to speak with the Ministry of Finance. I told her about Banjarmasin. Listen, this great city in Indonesia, why isn't everybody talking about Banjarmasin? They managed to reduce single-use plastics by like 90% in a year. She was very impressed with that story. And she said, that is great. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create a fiscal incentive for cities that succeed in reducing their plastic waste. And she did it the next year. And that very same year, Banjarmasin received 9 billion rupiah from this fiscal incentive. And immediately other cities started being interested, right? Oh, there's money involved. So this was a major driver, including for Bali, who the governor here pictured explicitly said, I'm going to ban plastic bags in Bali because I'm aiming for that fiscal incentive. So he did. We helped him draft that regulation, and then it got sued. So we had anticipated that it would get sued because Bali was the first province in Indonesia, was the first major city. If Banjarmasin, nobody really cared, but Bali, all eyes were on Bali at the time. There was huge pressure to get it right. So when they got sued, we weren't exactly surprised, but we did want to fight. It was a battleground. We call it the Bali battleground. We did want to fight to make sure that they won the case. So we banded together a group of environmental lawyers, put up an argument to support, the governor's lawyers, sent it to the Supreme Court, and we all won. So Bali won. There was a precedent that said cities are allowed to ban single-use plastic. It is within their authority. It doesn't have to be central government. And because of that win, more and more cities started issuing similar regulations, and that's why now we have more than 50 cities. To celebrate all this, back to external pressure, we coordinated a long march to reject single-use plastic. This is the first single-use plastic-themed march in Indonesia with other CSO collaborators to support the court decision and call for other cities to do the same thing, and thousands showed up. So as you can see in the picture, it was really more than we had expected, and it was a happy moment. It was kind of celebratory, and we're hoping that this kind of sets the stage for more kinds of regulations, not just for plastic bags, for other single-use plastics. This is Jakarta. Not long after the march, Jakarta banned plastic bags too. So now we have two major cities in our pocket, Jakarta and Bali. And now we're moving to traditional markets. So in our just last slide in our program with the traditional market, just to show everyone who always says it's not going to work in traditional markets because plastic is the cheapest. Plastic is the cheapest, and whatever, if you ban plastic, then it will inflate prices. It will make vendors have to resort to more expensive materials. But after we did our program, one vendor said, I've actually reduced my expenses because I don't have to buy plastic bags to provide for free to customers anymore. My customers now come in with their own bags, and I don't have to provide them with anything. So they've actually saved costs, and that is exactly the narrative. That is exactly the outcome that we want to see. That's just for plastic bags, and that is a low-hanging fruit. So the past 8 years has been a low-hanging fruit. What we're actually aiming for is to really crop away at this landfill that you see behind me here by targeting other single-use plastics as well, because single-use plastics is the problem from the point of redesign. It shouldn't be produced at all. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tiza. I love that picture with you with your boots. Did you end up wandering through the trash in those nice boots?
Yeah.
Okay, you could take down your screen, Tiza. You could unshare, but you'll get to share more later. I'm going to invite Doug to toss up his slides and continue to tell us some more stories. What I love is that since you last spoke for me, Tiza, more cities have started banning plastic bags because you just talked in December, so touche. All right, Doug, it's all yours, the virtual floor.
Thank you very much, Jennifer.
No problem.
And great stuff there, Tiza. Yeah, so my name is Doug Woodring. I'm the founder and managing director of Ocean Recovery Alliance. based in Hong Kong, and I've been doing this for more than 10 years, actually about 12. We do global work on plastic pollution and other ocean protection issues, but mainly on plastic. And I'm going to talk mostly today about something we've done in Cambodia, which is pretty neat. And it's what we call the Water Rising and Water Falling Festival. And I think it's important just to quickly highlight the word festival, because in some of these countries and markets where the government or the population is not quite ready to be highlighted on the fact that there's plastic pollution problems, mainly because of potential tourism impacts and the psychology of being branded with that. By bringing the word in festival, you can engage a lot of people and stakeholders in a very different way than saying you're going to go do a cleanup. And so we started this. We went to 3 villages. This was 3.5, 4 years ago. And the interesting point in Cambodia is, at least in the Tonle Sap Lake, is that the water rises and falls once a year by 6 meters. That's 18, 20 feet. It's the only lake in the world where this happens. When it's high water, the water goes right into their living rooms and they could take their boat there. When it goes down, the water comes out. And the purpose of this event is to highlight the fact that the plastic basically flows in and out of the village and the lake back and forth like a very slow moving tide or monster bringing it back in. And it gets stuck in all the trees and all of the bushes and all the canals that go out to the lake. So when the tourists come, it almost looks like bad Christmas trees with trash everywhere in the trees. And so we went to one of the pagodas. We didn't know any of the monks, but within 1 hour, telling them what we want to do, get them engaged. We mentioned the value of recycling. As soon as that happened, some of the local women in the pagoda heard that, and they actually were so surprised that a plastic bottle could become some kind of fabric and clothing. I was wearing a hat and a shirt made from both plastic bottles and old fishing net nylon, and they couldn't believe it. And that triggered their impact, their reaction to our discussion triggered the monks to get fully interested in this. Within an hour, they were on the riverbank with us picking plastic out of the trees with long bamboo poles. And the fishermen came along and started looking at this and say, wow, what are the monks doing up there, getting plastic out of trees? And it started this whole curiosity discussion. And so this is one of the villages we worked with, 10,000 people, tide, if you want to call it that, when the water's gone out. But the point is, they have never had any waste management actually in these outer villages, zero. So they either dump it in the water and let it go in and out, impacting many, many things, or they burn it. And that in itself is a big issue, which is often not talked about. I'll get to that in a minute. So we created the festival. We had the monks on board, which is very strong community power in Cambodia. We had all kinds of we had high school girls who were at a girls' high school in Siem Reap. They were our main ambassadors who went around to all the villages and engaged people. We got all of the youth, we got the fishermen, and we got the village chiefs. And so we had a 2-day-long festival. We went out and had fun and cleaned up things and really brought the ideas of inspiration around protecting our water, protecting their assets, and not dumping, and at least finding a way to not pollute their environments. So we went out in boats. A lot of this area is accessed by boats and canals, and there were people up in the boats with very long poles picking things out of the trees. And this got people just very excited to think about how they can be engaged as a team together in these 3 spots. Have any options? There are no trucks that come down and do your daily waste management that go 40 kilometers or 80 kilometers out of Siem Reap or one of the other cities to go pick up the trash. Unfortunately, in the world, the whole world, one of the World Bank estimates say that up to 40% of the world's trash is burned open pit, not through incineration, not through energy generation, but through open pit burning like this. And if you've been in Southeast Asia, especially at nighttime, because it's often illegal, at nighttime you don't get caught because most people can't see it. You have three very big problems when this happens. And this is very undiscussed in the ocean and plastic world. Most people never even talk about the problem of open pit burning. You have local respiratory impacts. That's the health immediately. When you breathe it, you can get a headache right away, if you know what I'm talking about. Carbon black, one of the biggest and worst contributors to global warming. And this article came out yesterday in The Guardian, says that the Earth's trapping unprecedented amount of heat, more than the model ever expected. And a huge amount of that comes from carbon black, and that would be burning. So if we can remove this need to burn and the need to dump in the waters, that is a big opportunity. And of course, the toxins which get into the air, the weather, and when I say weather, I mean the rain, because when these toxins go into the sky, they rain on a different country, they rain on water, they rain on crops, they get into our food system. And that's where we have a whole chain reaction of trash getting into our own bodies. So we have for years been promoting the need to clean rivers for more than 10 years. This has always been our discussion. Finally, around the world in the last year or two, it's become more topical, because everything that runs downstream runs to the ocean. And a lot of ocean people in the past were saltwater scientists and didn't bother too much with the freshwater and vice versa. And so we did a cleanup in the whole river, and the monks could then say to people, wow, the river's clean. Now you shouldn't be dumping in the river because you will have bad karma. And that's important, because if the river is dirty, there's no trust built in the system with the government and local authorities. The people just continue to dump something in the water. But if you clean it and the water is clean on the surface, you create a whole level of trust and engagement with the community, with the local village chiefs and the fishermen who take part in this. And so we cleaned over 10,000 kilos, that's 10 tons, out of this one small river. And as soon as it became clean, ever since then, the local government, in fact, the local government a week later imposed fines on the villagers if they were going to put their garbage bag on the river side of the street, because the rains just bring those bags right into the river. So they saw the fact that this cleaning really does make a difference. So then they put an enforcement law into that and got everyone engaged, and people really like that. Another impact no one talks about is just the propeller strikes. All of these people, a lot of them make their money from fishing, local fishing and tourism, and every single time, probably every 20 minutes, their propellers get hit with plastic bags in the waters, and that causes them to have to stop and untie it and untangle it and cut it off. And the festival aspect, we also brought our play. We created a play called Uncle Roo, the Recycling Rooster. It's in 7 languages now, actually 8. And it's about the rooster, because all villages have a rooster. And when they crow, they remind people about the recycling. So the kids hear that play. First time this village ever had a performance of a theater. When they hear that rooster the next morning in real life, they can be reminded through eco-repetition that they should be recycling. So we've now got the local government and the federal government on board. When we started, we hadn't even talked to them. They've seen what we've done and they're replicating. And last year during COVID, we created a rice bag, but not for collecting rice, but for putting in plastic. So all the villages have their own bags. They bring them into the pagoda, and now they get some food baskets to help them survive through the COVID period in the remote areas. And this is great. It's already happening in 30 villages in the area. The point is we get the plastic out of the other waste stream, and then that makes it easier to do other things with the other waste and get the plastic in a place where it doesn't harm the outdoor environment. So thank you very much, and happy to talk with Q&A later.
Thanks so much, Doug. And yeah, you can unshare your screen. And I'm really pleased, bravo, you're doing some really cool work, just like Tiza on the rooster. I'm going to think about roosters now a lot. But I really appreciate that you brought up the issues of the health and the climate impact. I'm actually going to have a meeting in December about the climate and health linkage. It is something that it's, once you start digging into it, you see, wow, this is pretty obvious. No, I'm really excited to see that work that you're doing, and lovely images. And now we're all going to look for roosters and think of them. All right, let's kind of move on away from roosters. Where's my Greenpeace friend here? Marion, why don't you share your screen and tell us your stories? I mean, already as you're doing that, I mean, you know, I think you're all seeing here that when I said at the beginning, these 4 people are at the front lines and very much working with people on the ground in an innovative way. All right, full screen, we're all good. And I will mute and pass the virtual microphone over to you.
Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon, I guess, to the viewers in Hawaii. Let me just share my screen. We're seeming to have some trouble here.
Okay, and before you start, I want to remind the audience that you can go to the Q&A box on the bottom right, and you can start asking questions anytime now. Doug wants to type answers, so send him some questions. Is it not sharing?
Yeah, it's pretty. Here, I think it's working now.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, we can see it. All right.
Right. Great. Yeah, so how is everybody doing? I hope everyone is doing well despite our difficult circumstances. So I'm here to talk about the Philippines' plastic problem. And I guess like anything else or anywhere else, the plastic problem here is an outcome of many different factors. And for the Philippines, really, sachet use is very, very high. A study by Gaia found that 164 million plastic sachets are being used on a daily basis here in the Philippines. And that doesn't even count all of the plastic bags and other plastic materials that are being used daily. For plastic bags, that's about another 93 million pieces of plastics that are in use every day here. And we also have consumer goods companies, the plastics and petrochemical sector, and the recycling industry. All of these players driving plastic use, intervening in public policies to ban or regulate single-use plastic, and also actively promoting harmful false solutions. So there's that widespread use of plastic for consumer goods, and then combined with industry interference. And then at the same time, the plastic crisis here is also being driven by rising plastic use in e-commerce, food deliveries, and more recently, COVID. The most observable or tangible of all of these plastic problems, so plastic waste in the environment, is what you'll often see in the news, in Philippine news. But of course, that's just one part of this very systemic issue. Segregation at source, recycling, composting aren't all that common. And that really has a lot of push, I guess, around poor waste management and a lot of laws that would have allowed for ecological solid waste management really was no longer implemented as it should have been. We have one law that's actually about 2 decades old and still hasn't seen full implementation or enforcement by a local government. So that's for poor waste management. We also have, to add to those waste management burdens, we also have waste trade because of supposedly recyclable materials coming in from global north countries, and they end up either in illegal recycling facilities, in our own landfills, or of course, worse is in our environment. And then for plastic production and unregulated recycling, there's also that additional contribution to a lot of health concerns in communities, as well as the climate change. And this is especially significant for the Philippines, which is a country that's severely affected by a changing climate. And of course, true to the systemic nature of plastic pollution, the problems here, they stem from various parts of the life cycle of plastic. So it's not just waste, but also production, consumption, other end-of-life considerations. And all of these problems are interconnected with each other, and other social issues like poverty, hunger, or gender and socioeconomic disparity. And in some cases, our plastic problems actually exacerbate difficult circumstances that Filipinos are already struggling with. So during extreme weather events, you start to experience flooding. Decreasing fish catch is a problem, but it's vastly worsened by contamination of pollution or by pollution. And it makes for this really vicious cycle for already vulnerable populations. So to address all of these issues and the plastic pollution crisis, Greenpeace Philippines works in 4 areas. We have policy work, lobbying for plastic bans, single-use plastic regulations, extended producer responsibility, and also institutional policies for schools, companies. And with that, we also have a corporate campaign. And these corporate campaigns, they're focused versus fast-moving consumer goods companies and e-commerce platforms. And the thrust for this is really to get them to shift to or shift their products, their services, and business models away from plastic and towards reuse. And the third strand of work that we're doing right now is changing mindsets and reframing narratives. So we want the people that we engage, to start really making those connections between plastic production and climate. We want them to look at this entire issue with a life cycle perspective and a lens of environmental justice as well. And so having an awareness of plastic pollution that it doesn't just start in post-consumer stages or at the end of life when you're disposing of plastic, but some of the biggest and most detrimental impacts really are in production as well. And I guess the last of the narratives that we really want to change is we want to bust the myth that zero waste is anti-poor. And this is something that's very common in the Philippines because they're seeing that a transition away from single-use plastics will inevitably leave certain communities like low-income groups behind. And really, that's not true because in reality, zero waste, stopping plastic production will be beneficial, most especially to low-income communities and vulnerable communities that are the ones that are most likely to be affected by plastic pollution. And the last of Greenpeace's work, and this is really what I wanted to share most about, is our solutions work. We try to amplify, develop, and implement solutions in collaboration with other organizations, small businesses, and local governments and communities. One example is our zero waste disaster response last year. After a typhoon, Greenpeace worked with partners and local governments to deliver to evacuation centers meal and hygiene kits, water refilling equipment, alcohol refills, and fresh produce for meals. And the different kits contained reusable cutlery, reusable plates and cups, refillable alcohol bottles. And this is because it was during the pandemic that this happened. So we prioritized hygiene as well. And then also refillable soaps, fabric face masks, all to use at the evacuation centers. And evacuees would also be able to use these materials afterwards when they went back to their homes. And the response really was done to show that disaster response doesn't have to be this wasteful process. Previous disasters had reported a lot of waste being generated. And what we did was try to change different components of a response. And here we showed community kitchens using local food from farmers, installing refilling stations, and then providing reusable goods for use can be components of disaster response so that they don't rely on unhealthy packaged meals, bottled water, or maybe disposable eating materials. A similar crisis response is one of our partners, done by one of our partners, Mother Earth Foundation. They also made a crisis response in the form of zero waste community pantries. And those are the kinds of innovation that we hope to see more of, seeing zero waste in different sectors and applied in different ways. So another solutions project that Greenpeace is working on, following that one from last year, is working with an incubator, Impact Hub Manila, and a community organization called Sikapin to sort of develop reuse systems as viable alternatives to sachets or individually packaged consumer goods. And we want to demonstrate not just the feasibility of these reuse systems in community settings, but the potential for replication and scaling up by stakeholders. So upstream solutions like reuse not only prevent plastic waste and create livelihoods for communities, but they also reduce impacts of plastic production on our ecosystem, our climate, and the communities. So what Impact Hub is doing is that with Greenpeace, we're working with data from the community through community assessments and polling, and then collaborating with different stakeholders. And what was designed was a reuse refill model for community level retail, and coupled that with an incentivization scheme for consumers. And what we plan to do is that we will be prioritizing locally sourced goods or inventory from small to medium enterprises or community organizations. And the idea behind that is to strengthen local economic ties and also make the system less vulnerable to crisis. Because what happened last year during the pandemic was that when lockdowns happened, a lot of supply chains were disrupted, and that really caused problems for big urban areas like Metro Manila. So we want to make sure that as much as possible, goods are locally supplied. And we also hope that by introducing these local establishments to the idea of sustainability or zero waste, we can lessen their environmental impact and also prepare them for this transition to circular models. Okay, so at the moment, we're in talks with local governments to host these projects.
Thank you so much for, I mean, that's like a plethora of information. And, you know, you guys, do you sleep? So good. Thank you so much. And again, what I love it, how each of you, a lot of the examples that Marion gave of the trends that are happening with the plastic sachets are big in Indonesia, Vietnam as well. Less big in China, but I think they're growing. And no, but thank you so much. And so, and remember, questions are starting to come in. You can also ask other people questions. I mentioned Doug, but I mean, everyone would probably be happy if they want to type during the presentations, and I'll start asking some more. But before that, Sun, would you like to jump on in here and share your slides?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer, and good everyone from good morning, everyone from Da Nang, Vietnam. So let me share my screen. Yeah, so I'm working for Pacific Environment as a consultant, but I'm also coordinator of Vietnam Zero Waste Alliance that was established from 2017. So today I will tell you some plastic pollution problem and the solution to that. There are many problems, but in my opinion, here is some the most challenge. So the produced plastic in Vietnam is steadily increasing. You can see that it reached nearly 9 million tons in 2018. And from the demand side, you can see that the per capita plastic consumption is increased from 3.8 kilogram in 1990 to 63 kilogram in 2019. And most of the plastic are used in the packaging sector. And also in relation with the GDP, we have a low GDP per capita, but we have a high plastic per capita. As a problem in the using and management, so you can see that in the school, student, our new generation, they have a habit of using plastic, and especially the single-use plastic. And the problem is that the waste in general and the plastic are not managed well. You can see the leak of plastic. You can see it everywhere. In the field, in the river, in the street. Another bad habit of Vietnam is that they are not sorting waste as such. All of the plastic is mixed with other waste and sent to the landfill. And as Dow said, in Cambodia, we also have a problem of open waste burning. So here's one of our work. Our member has done waste audit from 2018 to 2020. And what we found is that the plastic occupies from 50 to more than 20%. And the problem is that more than half of that are non-recyclable plastic, including 36% of the bag, nylon bag, and 19% of multi-layer and single layer. And you can see that Vietnamese people use a lot of bag, like 500 bag per person per year. We also find some top producer plastic as usual with Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Nestle. But we also found something very positive. That is in Cham Island, where the plastic bag ban was implemented in 2009. And here the per capita plastic is 2 to 4 times smaller compared to other places without the ban. So this is a good basic and good premise for the ban in the citywide or national. Here's I would like to tell you about the policies that Vietnam have done in recent to cope with the plastic problem. So first, that in the new law of Vietnam on environmental protection issued in 2020, the waste sorting is stated is compulsory. It will be sorted into 3 types: organic, recyclable, and other. The second new policy is on extended producer responsibility. This with the packaging sector is new, so we still have a lot of debate. I will go into detail if you're interested in later. Other policy that stated in the law is about the single-use plastic product limitation. So in the draft degree, in 2025, no production and consumption of nylon bags which are smaller than 50 by 50 centimeters and thinner than 50 micrometers. The law also states that the government have to issue the roadmap to ban. But here is our proposal of a roadmap. We hope it will be addressed by the Montreal Ministry of Environment. The policy is a circular economy. The first time is stated in the law. So as usual, there is a lot of debate on the roadmap to implement circular economy and the supporting policy. Another policy is on waste trade. So we already decide the list of the scrap, plastic scrap will be that are allowed to import to Vietnam. And so in the draft decree now, the scrap are only allowed to be imported for using as input in production. And one company are allowed to import maximum 80% of design capacity. And last is some image of our work with the zero waste modern building. This is the first 2 pictures. in Hoi An city. And this is our zero waste movement. Yes, and here is our capacity building. We organize zero waste for the journalists. Yeah, Zero Waste Academy for the journalists. We involved in, the EPR campaign. We comment on the RAP degree, and this is one of the workshops that we participate. Yes. So that is all for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we will get to that EPR question in a second. Yeah, so I'm gonna, we have some questions that came in. I wanted to ask just a couple of my team, my 4 Avengers here. One, I'm gonna switch the order from what we talked about before, guys. I wanna start off with so Doug, you talked about, you had these 2 festivals that were a success, and you talked, you're starting to build this community movement. You're starting to reach out, you got the attention of and all of you have done this too. You're working with local governments, but I'd love it if Doug, if you can talk just a little bit more about like what's your next step? And I want each of you to say like, pick what, and so Marion, you just have to pick one thing because what's your next step, Doug, on, just briefly with your project in Cambodia, and then each of you also talk a bit further, like something ambitious that you're going to do. Doug?
Right. So our objective when we started with just 2 or 3 villages, we always wanted it to get to be 100 or 400 around the lake. Now there's already 30, and we've done that even during COVID. We had socially distanced cleanups, and the other villages want to be part of that around the lake side. So the first step, we have to remember we can't go from 0 to 100 in one step. And the main first step is to build the awareness, build the appreciation, build the pride, so that people realize they don't dump in water or they don't bin it. So that means they either have to start preventing and learn how to do that, or recycling. And the main thing is sorting. One of the main problems of the world's waste stream is contamination, and that it goes mainly between plastic and organics. Once you have those mixed, you can't do much with either. So the harvest plastic bags we gave, looking like the rice bags, allow the village houses to collect either their little household waste, or the outdoor waste. Only the plastic goes in those bags. So it means the other waste streams are more easy to use. The organics can be used locally. The paper and other things can be used in less sorting. And then the plastic can be handled in new ways. If it's not contaminated now, you can start thinking about how and what can be recycled. How can you standardize a few things? Where can that go? The main thing, at least, is to get it to a proper place where it doesn't bleed into the environment. And if at this point in time, that's a landfill, that is better than being out in the environment. So by this collection process and rewards with a bit of food and rice, it gets them all thinking about that. And so obviously the next steps will be to, maybe get some more support from the government or entity that applies pickup, recovery with trucks. So because they just don't have that now, and if you don't have that, it's hard to get to the next step.
I mean, it's like we had the first meeting I had with TISA. It was called the plastic first mile. That's the toughest part, right? How to get it, and they struggle with it in all countries, even in the United States. TISA, what about you? What's something next big that you're going to leap into? You went from 30 to 50 cities. What next?
There's a way to expand to other objects, but also a way to expand into other subjects. So we're targeting other objects. Very much agree with Marion that sachets is a problem. Not sure why they're still being produced today. Am I freezing?
No, you look good. But I have to interject. You know what I've noticed recently, Tisa? We're seeing more sachets in our grocery stores here too, like more convenience. Really? I won't name brands, but just like, ice cream bars turned into shakes, and they're in these. I'm like, what? And I'm sure the same thing in Hong Kong, right? Right, Doug? More sachet stuff. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
All about marketing.
Yeah. And straws are still abundant. and cups, cups for drinking, water in cups with tiny little straws attached to it. All these things, they're slated to be banned in Indonesia by 2030, which is way too long. And we think that, producers should just start sooner and just stop producing them. So working a lot with regional governments to figure out how how municipalities, how cities can start moving ahead without waiting for 2030. And also now e-commerce is a big problem because everybody's stuck at home, everybody's forced to do deliveries, and a lot of the deliveries are wrapped in things that we can't choose. We can't choose the wrapping. So there's no consumer choice to go environmentally friendly when it comes to wrapping from e-commerce. So we just did an action in front of 9 e-commerce companies here in Indonesia, together with Greenpeace Indonesia as well, and other organizations, asking them, demanding them to give consumers options. So that's still ongoing, and we'll see what their response is.
Yeah, the e-commerce is a bear. We did some research into China's food delivery companies, and Meituan, which is the biggest, in one day, the plastic packaging, one day, could carpet 360 soccer fields.
Oh my goodness.
Because sometimes it's hard to get the scale, because you say, Tiza's standing next to a giant mountain. You can see that, but yeah, that's good. And how about Sun? What's pick one of your topics and tell us what's next on the horizon? Is it the EPR or what?
Yeah, thank you, Zen. As a establishment of Vietnam Zero Waste Alliance, we have a 4 pillar. First is a zero waste model building. The second is policy advocating. The third is about corporate campaigning, and the fourth is network enlarging and capacity building. So we do in parallel, I think, because the zero waste model building and the policy, they are like a bottom-up approach and top-down together. So with the model, success model, we can show up to the government and ask them for the policy. So at present, because of the COVID-19 and also given the context of Vietnam, that we are drafting the decree. So we focus on policy advocacy. We give a comment on all of the waste management regulation, and yes, EPR, single-use plastic ban, circular economy, waste trade, waste management, and the decree will issue in the 1st of January 2002. So from now to that, we will continue to do advocating. Yes.
So you're just like moving a mountain, all these parallel campaigns. That's awesome. How about Marion? What's pick one of your many campaigns? What's like next on the horizon to push them further?
So there's a lot going on in the Philippines at the moment, like with the policy. There's so many developments that's happening, both positive and negative. But in terms of reuse, for example, we're still in the process of setting up our reuse refill project. But what we hope to do is, after the pilots have been set, we hope to really make replication of the model as easy as possible. And we plan to come up with a guide and a business plan that's more for the Philippine context, that can be references for small businesses, government agencies, or even organizations that want to implement programs around reuse. There's so many people that are interested in taking on zero waste models, but really the questions that they face are more around how do they do it? How do they get started? How do they make those or establish those supply chains? So hopefully with what we've learned from these pilots, we can share it to other organizations and other communities as well, so that they can do the same. And there's so many great models of zero waste in the Philippines from all these different communities that hopefully when combined and as a collective, what people will start seeing that it is viable. It's just as affordable and accessible to them. And we can sort of disprove that claims of companies saying that zero waste really won't work, or it's not viable in the Philippines or in other developing countries because people need plastics. We want to dispute that and disprove that.
And also to clarify, when you say zero waste, it doesn't mean necessarily that you're not generating any waste, but that it doesn't leak, or that it's recycled. Is that the main definition?
Well, for the zero waste model that we're thinking, it will completely not have any plastics, and we want to try to use reusable containers and start teaching communities, because not really teaching, because decades ago the Philippines actually had this culture of refill and reuse well before sachets were ever introduced. And then we sort of want to reclaim that culture, those practices, bring that back and revive them.
Well, speaking of sachets, I love, it's a beautiful sounding word, but it's the ugly result when you throw it away. Because sachets they're very, very difficult to recycle. And in fact, when last year when we did a report we did this big report asking got a lot of op-eds from people in Indonesia, we were shocked to discover that there's hardly any recycling plants in Indonesia. And I'm like, dang, it's such a big place, because in China, they've got a lot of recycling plants. And but so I wanted to ask about in terms of recycling, that, in China, we're seeing, they're in the process of, they're going to be even though they have recycling plants, so much waste, they're going to incineration, they're expanding landfill. What are you seeing in, I don't know, well, we'll start with Tiza, since this was start with Indonesia, is as part of a zero waste, is waste to energy incineration and better landfilling, is that also part of the solution that you guys are recommending or is being pushed?
Well, it's a false solution. And it is being pushed by certain parties as zero waste, because look, hey, the waste disappears and they call that zero, but that's not what we call zero. Zero waste is inspired by this idea that everything on this planet should work like the planet itself, meaning that it should be circular, work like every living being on the planet, right? It's always regenerative, like compost becomes soil, becomes plants, becomes nutrition, becomes plants again, and then so on and so on. So there's always a cycle of life and death that is absolutely absent in the linear economy that we have now. So when you take trash and you encourage limitless production of trash, saying that this can all be burnt at the end, that's not circular. And the idea that it's zero is also false, because after burning, there's some residue. There's fly ash, there's bottom ash, there's emissions, which we're all trying to avoid right now. And so it's not true that it's zero.
There can be carbon emissions, right?
Exactly, there can be carbon emissions, not to mention all the dioxins and carbon black. So what would be circular is a reuse economy that would be circular, where we use things, we produce things, we design things with the intention that these things can be used again and again and again, can be returned to the producer, can be refilled by the producer, used by the consumer, and returned to the producer again. Completely doesn't generate waste at all. That's what we would call zero waste. So, we really need to push back against false narratives of what zero waste is.
But recycling, it has to be part of the mix of the solutions. Sure. What about could someone else want to say something else about recycling in your country, or like Doug, in Cambodia, are they in a similar situation like Indonesia with very, very little recycling capacity?
Yeah, the challenge for the world is there's not enough recycling capacity. The US is a perfect example. They hollowed out all their recycling scaled capacity, and they basically used arbitrage to send stuff, labor arbitrage. That's why it's gone to the other countries. Australia, Japan, Europe's done the same thing. So one of the questions had to do a little bit about that shipment. We have to think about, why is the US sending it there in the first place? They haven't signed the Basel Agreement, and yeah, so that's its own
can you say
issue,
what can you tell people what the Basel Agreement is?
The Basel Agreement was set up in '89 to stop the flow of hazardous materials. So they didn't want, dangerous toxic materials going between country to country to offload them. And just this January, they added an amendment to add dirty waste plastic, not clean processed plastic, for recycling, which is absolutely needed for feedstock in the recycling system. So you mentioned China. When China banned the import of waste 4 years ago, they didn't realize the knock-on effect that all the recyclers would leave China. So actually China shot itself in the foot in some ways, because the big recyclers who know how to do it moved, because they couldn't get the feedstock from the West. So it changed the whole system. And when you look at global demands for recycled content from the big brands, which are huge in the coming years, the amount of recycled infrastructure investment for grinders and shredders and cleaners is expected to be over $400 billion in the next 20 years. So that means Indonesia, Cambodia, all these places will probably get some of that, and they need it. Because right now, Cambodia has very, very, very tiny amount of local recycling. Most of it will go to Vietnam because they have more manufacturing to absorb it. But you have to think about the country. There's enough manufacturing to even absorb what you process locally. And without that, the circular economy doesn't even get started. Otherwise, you need to be able to trade it from one country to another.
Yeah. Well, what about Marian? Would you like to jump in at all? Anything to say about recycling in the Philippines?
Well, it's basically the same situation as Indonesia. We don't have a lot of recycling facilities, but I guess regardless of the state of waste management, recycling shouldn't be the end all be all to solving plastic pollution. Companies want to make it seem like recycling is the go-to solution to distract people from the bigger issue, from the root cause of this problem. And yeah, recycling can deal with the waste that's already there, but this process, as Tisa said, has a lot of problems. And really the focus should be on waste prevention, making sure that we don't have any potential problems right from the beginning. And that's what's so great about focusing on the upstream stages of plastics life cycle. And we can do that with bans, reuse, reduction of corporate use of single-use plastics. I think those are the things that we really have to put more focus on, as opposed to all solutions like recycling. Or I'm not sure if this is happening in other Southeast Asian countries, but corporations are also starting to sort of intervene in a lot of legislation to try to legitimize co-processing or waste to energy. And all of these false solutions are now being introduced to the public as the answer or the salvation when it comes to plastic pollution, when in reality, all of these processes have really strong health impacts and then climate impacts. And it goes against the grain or the plan to be net zero or to have a lot of climate action. But yeah, so here in the Philippines, those are the things that are happening. And I think the only way to sort of counteract that is with more public awareness, because like Filipinos love solutions. They love seeing that all of these answers and innovations coming up. And we have to make sure that the things that they start to adopt really are the real solutions when it comes to the issue.
That's good. Well, one thing that is when you're talking about going more upstream, maybe Shren and other people can jump in, because Ren talked about enhanced producer responsibility, which is it's usually a law that's going to be requiring companies to take care of their packaging from the cradle to the grave. Because right now, and I assume this is true around the world, it's really usually cities that have to pay for disposal either recycling or burning. And now the EPR is trying to push the cost onto the companies. Ren, can you tell us a little bit more about what, because it's a big push in Vietnam to try to get EPR law, correct?
Yeah, so let me share my screen a little bit.
Sure, to show that one slide. It'll be nice, easier to see the picture.
Yeah. Yeah, so as you said, recycling is like a downstream solution, and EPR actually is the upstream solution. And if we create, like the law, create the initiative that big enough, then the company will change their package from hard to easy to cycle, or from packaging with to without package, or to the reuse system. But the problem in Vietnam on the extended producer responsibility is that we are now in the drafting period, and because it is a new with the packaging sector. So there are a lot of debates. First is about the time to start the EPR. Many companies want to delay because they say they met difficulty with the COVID-19. But in our opinion, not all of the company have that difficulty, because a lot of the sector pack product, they even benefit from pandemic. People here, like instant noodle in Vietnam, is at high demand. The second thing is about the eco-modulated fee. Now in the draft decree is very simple, but in our opinion, in the long run, the decree should give a roadmap, a plan to improve this equation, to create incentive for the producer to change their packaging. Next argue is about the recycling rate. At present is set little bit low, around the actual recycling rate about 15 to 20%, and they limit that will be increased like 5% every 3 years. But we don't agree with that. We are advocating to increase that. The first problem is about recycling criteria. So as you said before, incineration, chemical recycling are now seen as a acceptable recycling in the EPR, and why it should not. The fifth problem is of free ridership. The current draft, they limit the scope of EPR application. They apply for the big company only, like with revenue more than 50 billion Vietnamese dong, or the import revenue is lesser than 30 billion Vietnamese dong. But we don't agree with that. We think that all of the company enterprise, they should they should pay for the EPR fee as the principle of polluter pay pollution. And the last argument is about the member in the National EPR Council. At present, is in the draft is only includes the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Industry and Trade, Ministry of Financial, producer and exporter. But in our opinion, it should include also the NGO and the representative of the consumer association, because in the nature, the company will internalize externality cost, and everything will be pushed in the price of the product, and the people have to pay, actually the consumer. So the consumer have a right and interest to be in monitoring the EPR system. Yes, thank you.
Thanks so much for that. I want to open up to the panel. There have been some questions in the Q&A box from the audience. Come on, audience, start typing, send us some more questions, because I'm going to start asking some of these in between more of mine. There was one question that came in about, like, how do you, like, is there a solution for, they asked about for reduction of plastic in like global big box stores like Costco's, which makes me, because I was going to ask you, I mean, EPR is a policy strategy that's going to try to force companies, give them a menu of options how to reduce plastic. But are there other things that your organization is doing? Or I know, Doug, you're involved in the region with business. So tell me a little bit, I'd like to hear, maybe we'll start with Doug, about other ways of engaging business or pressuring, something that you haven't said already.
I mean, yeah, but you know, that's a great example. And what's often not talked about much is the reverse supply chain and bring back programs. So companies that engage early on with their customer base, especially when you have big retailers that have lots of material and packaging, it's very easy. They have the space for them to have a bring back program and give credits and value to the consumers to bring the stuff back in, which is clean and uncontaminated, and that makes it much easier to
What's an example
recycle.
of it? What's an example?
Any of the packaging, any of the used packaging, whether it's your soap bottles, your detergents, your cardboard boxes, all of this. It's been done like this in South America and many countries, but a lot of countries aren't doing it aggressively yet. And that can be a big advantage, even to keep consumers engaged, coming to your store and not the other store, because they're bringing the stuff back and they get a coupon or a reward for doing that, a discount.
Tiza, do you have anything to say about, I don't know, reverse supply chain or other ways that working with businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to emphasize what Doug mentioned. Absolutely agree with the reverse supply chain, and it can work. What it basically is infrastructure. This is massive scale infrastructure with a lot of opportunity for new jobs by creating a reverse supply chain that requires all the products post-consumption to either return to a recycler or return for it to be reused. This means, logistics companies can grow not just by sending, consumer goods to shoppers, but also picking up their trash, returning it to either a recycler or back to the producer. We're working with food delivery companies at the moment to test out some of these models where people can order food from their favorite restaurant in a reusable container, and then reverse logistics are involved there, which can return the container back to the restaurant. I think there's a big opportunity that needs to be explored there, because it's also a huge investment opportunity as well for businesses.
Well, that's a great point about the kinds of jobs that could come from, it's just like, think of like clean energy for climate, right? Because coal jobs, we had our coal jobs, we love our coal jobs, but then you suddenly realize there's more jobs in the green. The transition is what's hard. What about, did you want something, Doug?
Yeah, well, I was going to say that there's many studies have shown that at least 10 times more jobs created from the recycling industry, and even more than that in the reprocessing than typical waste management, because you need to sort it, gather it, reprocess it, reuse it, innovate, blend it with the new product. And that is a huge new area that every single country can actually benefit from.
Yeah, apropos innovation, because I guess we're talking business now, folks, that I've heard about. This guy wrote for another project at the Wilson Center where they're taking, do you know mushrooms, fungi? They're using it to create new styrofoam, because EPS, I mean, like particularly like for fishing, you put frozen fish in it. And I mean, styrofoam, and my state has banned styrofoam. The Maryland has banned styrofoam. And now we're seeing for food stuff, there's like paper bowls, but they're lined with plastic. And I'm like, that's not recyclable either. But what about innovation? Can any examples that either, here I've got my mushroom styrofoam. There's another company also using mushrooms to make leather-like fabrics. Marion, can you talk a little? And there could also be innovation in strategies to deal with plastic. Do you have? Can you each kind of give me an idea of some cool innovations that you're seeing in your space? Marion?
Yeah, so I would say in terms of innovation, there really needs to be more investment in research and development for and infrastructure for reuse systems, and also more policies to ban plastic. And I'm not just saying reuse because that's what we're working on right now, but because there's a lot of potential there for our country in terms of jobs, freeing up public resources that were previously dedicated to waste management, and also new markets. I don't think people realize just how much the job potential, or how big the job potential is in reuse. And there's not enough data yet to really determine how many jobs, how many more jobs it can generate. But at the same time, because it is at the very top of the zero waste hierarchy for waste management, there's this basically whole wide open arena for introducing not just jobs, but also other kinds of technology or systems that would be able to allow us to reduce waste. And of course, when we're phasing out plastic, there will also be this gap left behind. And we need something. Reuse will basically be the one, will be needed to sort of fill that vacuum. And more and more people are interested in it, but there's really not enough financial incentive or support, whether that's from the government or maybe from the private sector. If we were to start really investing in developing these systems and then putting up shared infrastructure between bigger companies and also smaller companies, I think that could really have a very lucrative sector that people can engage in.
I like how you hinted there about, because I keep thinking, I compared a lot to what's happening in the climate space. Like there's policies that are technology pushing policies in the energy space, and that could be the same thing in plastics. Ren, anything that you want to offer about, someone had a question that said, has there been any initiatives in Southeast Asia that use rice to make bags? That's one example. You could answer that, but just so when someone in the audience is saying like, yeah, is there some kind of alternatives? Are there innovations in terms of non-plastic products, or any innovation you want to talk about, Ren?
I think the definition of innovation may be understand different from country to country. And like in Vietnam, now there are a lot of startups to produce an alternative to plastic, like plant-based bioplastic. But I think still there's a problem with the bioplastic. And so I think the innovation should be focused on the redesigning, the reduce and reuse. So reuse and refill is a good method to reduce plastic, I think, and we should focus on that.
Okay, good. I like that. Tiza, anything about on the innovation space that you want to tell us what's happening down there in Indonesia?
I think I'd like to highlight that innovation requires us to consider local wisdom, because a lot of times people think innovation is, some new fancy kind of technology, and that's not created yet, or is in the works in the lab and it's not financially viable yet and everybody's looking towards it. But we have to remember, just as Marian said, we had the solutions. Like Southeast Asian countries were fine back in the day using reusable items, using these beautiful woven baskets for everything, using tiffin containers for lunch. And there was a whole system around it. There was a whole delivery system around these reusable items. There was a whole waste disposal system around these reusable items. And unfortunately, that has been eroded. So we want to bring back that local wisdom, but the innovation here means tailoring it to the modern world that we live in right now, where supply chains maybe are farther away from each other. So we would have to figure out maybe refrigeration systems for long distance transport, but with the same type of local wisdom that we used to use. Bulk stores are cropping up now. Bulk stores are usually for kind of premium market, middle to upper class consumers. But we also need to remember that traditional markets were the original bulk store. And that's not, something fancy. Let's think of how to innovate traditional markets back to the way that they were before, but with better sanitation standards, better deliverability, better access for the market vendors to access, I don't know, online platforms, modern delivery systems, and reverse logistics. So all these be categorized as innovations as well. Don't forget. Just putting it out there. Thanks.
No, this is really good answers here. But before I go further, do you guys want to ask each other a question? Is that crazy? I just always like to say this on these little panels. It's harder because we're not really around a table. You can grab someone. No? You just want me to keep peppering you? Okay, I will keep peppering you. One question that came up, and you touched, I think maybe Doug and Marion and maybe wrote some answers, but what about the plastic? I mean, because these are all good things that you're talking about, but I thought maybe one monkey wrench is that the fact that the US and other countries are still shipping waste. I mean, is what's happening in Indonesia in terms of and in Vietnam and Philippines? Are you guys being like China and saying stop, no more, or is plastic imports still? Are you drowning in them, Tiza?
We have a loophole in our regulation that allows 2% contamination of plastics in waste paper imports. But in practice, it's hard to monitor. So instead of 2%, we get about 30%. And this is illegal. So by and large, Indonesia has said no to plastic scrap, post-consumer scrap imports. But we're still saying yes to post-production type scraps, which are, supposedly in theory fine. They're clean, separated. They're just one type of thing. But in reality, it's all mixed up. It's all mixed up with post-consumer waste that's not usable. So I'm thinking implementation enforcement is a huge issue still.
Doug?
Well, that's a global challenge. When you have exporting of products from around the world, from big brands to countries that can't handle it. I mean, you mentioned Indonesia doesn't have recycling capacity. So even though the product says it's recyclable, maybe in California and the Netherlands, it's not recyclable in Indonesia or Philippines or Vietnam.
Yeah.
So that's where extended producer responsibility comes in. You have to think about your markets, not just the country you're getting legislated in, but the countries that you're selling to. And if we lock all of this material into the countries who buy it, and they can't move it to another country that can process it and get it into the demand for the brands who actually want it back to put in their recycled content, there's no way to have a circular economy. And the circular economy only will happen with a global system in the sense of plastic. You can't have a local one in Fiji or Vanuatu or Kenya because there's no processing and there's no manufacturing to absorb it. So I think we have to be really realistic about, and also the job creation opportunity. That's why a lot of these countries still import it. The jobs that it makes are significant, and they're value adding to that material to be then used in someone else's manufacturing. So if you can make pellets in your country from someone else's feedstock material, there's no reason that should not be allowed. Just like trading ore, copper, metal, anything else that you process somewhere else.
Okay, good. In Vietnam, is Vietnam importing plastic waste from overseas?
Yes, China is good, but Vietnam should follow. But unfortunately, we still now allow the import of scrap, we have a list of scrap to be, allowed to import it to Vietnam. And now we have some limitation. We state some limitation on the law. As I said before, we allow the one company, recycling company, to import maximum 80% of design capacity. We now advocating on this, should not 80% of design capacity. It should be actual capacity, and also the rate of import should be allowed to import should be reduced year by year. To enhance waste sorting and recycling inside the country. And we still import waste from Japan and America formally, but we still have some like illegally waste imported through Cambodia, in the border in the south. Day to day, a lot of waste from Cambodia to Vietnam, because in the Cambodia there's not recycling infrastructure like in Vietnam. We are also poor infrastructure, but somehow we buy that material. So the problem is the illegal waste importing.
And Marion, just briefly on Philippines, issues with waste imports there as well.
Yeah, we also have laws preventing hazardous waste from coming in, but same as Indonesia, we have loopholes allowing recyclables and even some hazardous waste like fly ash from coal plants to come in under very specific conditions. We do want to prevent mixed municipal waste from entering the Philippines, but with limited human resources, our customs really can't assure that every single container gets checked. So it's a bit of a gamble. And then the idea is that hopefully most of these containers that come in are legitimate and recyclables. So yeah, we still accept waste from countries. We even have bilateral agreements like with countries like the US. And some lawmakers are trying to craft bills that would ban waste importation completely, but we're seeing a lot of pushback from recycling and manufacturing sectors, because they do claim that all of these this waste are industrial inputs that they're gonna utilize. So the counter to that would be, why don't we just use our own waste that we're generating in on a domestic level? And it really shows how interconnected everything is, because then they say, well, it's poor waste management, nothing gets segregated, waste is contaminated, so they can't recycle it. And yeah, so there's a lot of things to fix, but domestically, we also have that those issues that still allow waste trade to flourish. And it's going to be a long fight, I guess, to get that banned. But at the same time, there's also hope, because more and more people are starting to understand really the waste trade issue here in the country.
Yeah, well, good. I mean, it's true. It is global. And in some ways, even though it did cause kind of a big mess, a big game changer, but like when China closed its doors, there's just this whole domino effect that's happened globally, new conversations. They're even in the US, we're talking about enhanced producer responsibility at the national level. Don't know if it's going to pass, but once they start talking about it, companies are already starting to react. And I think we're seeing that also in Indonesia, Vietnam, and other countries where it's happening. Well, we're hitting up to the end of the time. Dang, it was fun. We didn't even get to talk about clothes. We'll have to do that next time. Clothing also has got a lot of plastic in it. I want to thank all of my speakers, and obviously the hosts, the universities, and of course, Luce Foundation. Want to point out we had one of our big questioners here at Box, Victoria. She wanted to know if there's going to be a recording available. Yes, there will be a recording available. And I think if you go to the East West Center website, or we'll make sure that we get you that, but all these are saved. Also, if you're interested, still self-promotion, the China Environment Forum at the Woodrow Wilson Center, we've got a series of plastic meetings. We also have web blogs, so plastic everywhere. Just so you know that the next meeting in this series of Southeast Asian transition, plastic runs through it. There's going to be a meeting on fisheries and aquaculture, and then one of the speakers will talk about the challenge of plastic in aquaculture, and the others will talk about broader trends and issues in Southeast Asia with fisheries. That will be on Wednesday, October 13th at 2 to 3:30 Hawaii Standard Time PM in the afternoon. Of course, they're not doing it at 3 in the morning. Again, I want to thank all of you for your presenting here, waking up early. We're staying up late. It somehow works out. Yeah, and again, bravo. You guys are doing amazing work and eager to learn more. Thank you very much for tuning in, everyone, and have a great